afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast addendum, another State of the Balance. Here with me, your handsome host, Imperial Dane, Master of Analysis, here to cover the last month here. Things have changed, things have happened. Of course, we've got a big upcoming patch here, the 29th. With stuff happening there, including 2 new commanders, so you know, stuff's bound to change in there. So of course, what's sort of been happening in the month there, probably also now trying to draw something in. It's called companies2charts.com, a small site which does provide sort of statistics on the 150 best players for the different sides and so on there. Perhaps not the best, but it just tend perhaps, you know, sort of serve as a guiding star, you know. It's not going to, you know, be the best, you know, mark or beacon, but it might just give you an idea of how things are lying. In that sense, you know, if you sort of look at that, so far Allies are quite ahead. In fact, they've been for the last 2 months more or less, than now the Germans beginning to catch up, but overall still you sort of got Allies above average, Germans below average. So the Allies are actually winning more than the Germans, which of course indicates they're must be doing at least rather well up in the higher tiers. I imagine it's sort of to some extent follows the same on the lower tiers. In that sense, it sort of tends to be the Americans so far who are in the lead. British are close, but they're never quite there, And the Germans is sort of Oberkommando in lead, Wehrmacht, not quite as much though, not quite as much. But now, of course, onto the actual armies, onto the actual bits, the actual description, of course. I mean, we can call stock, common charts, just sort of to give an indicator of sort of where things might be going. Also know what to keep in mind of. So, I mean, if we look at the sort of initially the British sort of in terms of what they're doing at the moment, what they've been doing is basically, you know, initially it was all vanguard, it was all, you know, special weapons, it was all crocodiles, a lot of commando officers and so on, lots of fire, lots of death, also centaurs. To some extent there's still centaurs, but it does seem to be dropping off here with the upcoming patch, which will very much nerf the centaur and the crocodile. A bit of the commandos, but you know, they won't be nerfed too hard, and again people are still using the commanders because they'll still be reasonably alright, just, you know, they won't be walking around with Sten guns and some are performed like bloody assault rifles. I mean, in that sense, we are seeing some change. There's more regular commando doctrine now. Some are using artillery, but generally at the moment I'm mostly seeing commandos. Some are still sticking to vanguard, absolutely stoically, stubbornly clinging to that crocodile, believing in its fiery fervour and, you know, ability to just burn stuff to the ground. And some, of course, sort of spreading out a bit. But, you know, it's sort of, I think, centering mostly around commando doctrines, which is a pretty solid doctrine when you really look at it. Though most people just use with the commandos, maybe a bit of air supremacy, and then they pretty much forget the rest of the doctrine, which is also pretty good. We are seeing some players, of course, using other tanks, but again, it's sort of so focused rather heavily, but also around Anvil. I mean, Anvil's really popular right now, in part because you then get a lot of sappers, and then you get the heavy engineers, and since they get armor bonuses, they get Vickers Cage, and it's all for free. Of course, they move slower, but you know, that's never really halted anyone from upgrading them in with better guns and more toughness. I know, I'm guessing fortified tea. So there are very much some things there to sort of keep in mind there for the Brits and themselves might rack in the future again. I mean, it's probably going to sort of follow that trend largely again. Commandos, perhaps I might try more artillery and some others, but again, you know, there'll probably still be some trying to rush for centaurs. It just won't have the same effect as initially did, which is really good, in particular for the Oberkommando West, which really struggled against a centaur, which could easily clear a building in second, which really negated a lot then of the Oberkommando West defences for a larger part of the game. But, you know, there's not much else to the Brits. They're sort of rather focused around that. They're still, you know, trying to get to grasp. It's still a 2-month-old faction. There'll still be sort of more to be learned, more to be grasped. I mean, it's not over yet. I mean, for some factions, it takes, you know, months, even years to sort of grasp, in particular some of the greater nuances, to sort of really get the most of their factions. So, I mean, you know, we probably shouldn't be keeping too much there, but, you know, still probably what's going to happen there again. I mean, Churchill also getting nerfed, we're probably still seeing that. We're still probably seeing a lot of Anvil. Hammer's currently not so popular, despite also being pretty good, but I think that's more of a case of people just realising how good Hammer is really, which is one I'm personally more fond of rather than Anvil. So, I think that covers the British. Then moving on to the Americans, again also rather popular at the moment, rather potent. They're not really getting any nerfs, of course they're getting the big doctrine there by the end of the month. And for the Americans, it's very much all rifle company at the moment. It's rather been at the moment a lot there, but again, flamethrowers, white phosphors, EC8s, veteran life being trained there. I mean, it's pretty much all most American players love. It's not necessarily because it's best. I mean, Paratroop was also pretty damn good, so the other doctrines, but it's pretty much all what they go for. With the Americans, you know, it's sort of one of those things, you know, when you have to describe it, it sort of makes you want, you have to do it like weekly, these states of the balance, partly because the Americans keep changing like the bloody weather. I mean, you know, it's like, you know, and, you know, to keep out this week for a northern, you know, armour front coming in, with a slight chance of paratrooper rain, you know, during the afternoon there Thursday. Stuff like that, because, you know, it's a lot more mercurial and not necessarily always based on logic, but armour has in fact sort of been moved in there. Of course, we don't have to describe the Perch, that pretty much be a hurricane sort of hitting at full force, and I'd advise all my German viewers, you know, brace the hell for it. But I mean, again, with the Americans, it's very much rifleman. It's very much, you know, just EC8, which does, of course, sort of indicate they're a bit, you know, predictable in some sense. I mean, you know what to expect, and if you know what to expect, you also know what to counter. Lieutenant Captain, again, that's a bit more safety. Where again, well, there's a lot Captain now, and briefly slight stage of Lieutenant. I mean, it's more balanced now. Some go for Lieutenant, some for Captain. It's a lot more common now to actually go for both. So again, you have both officer for jobs and more choice, and then sort of what to deal with. Air half-jet become more popular again. Pretty decent there for what they can do. M20's sort of there. Stewards are still happy, and of course the pack house is also quite happy there to be used a lot. Though of course after the nerf, perhaps not as much. That's not so going to be. It's going to be really bad. Yes, you know, it's not going to be quite as damn good as it used to be. So, but from the Americans in the future, I probably expect a lot of Pershings, a lot of range. I mean, again, that doctrine is really good. Smoke, mines, ranges, the ability for vehicle and armor to work together with bonuses and a heavy tank. I mean, that's the new shock rifle, except better. I mean, it's better than shock rifle. So expect a lot of it until people get sick of it, and even then it's still going to be used a lot, so, you know, you're probably going to be sick of it if you're not the one using it. But of course, how to counter it? I mean, most American players are just probably going to rush for it. Means they're going to pull off the Soviet or Wehrmacht, you know, Führer syndrome. That is, they go for one tier, get that used a bit, get a single armor piece, knock that out, then hit with them with tier 3 armor, whatever you can as quickly as possible, gain the field advantage with that, and then, you know, crush the remainders there when they get out. That's probably going to be sort of your best option for dealing with that. If you're the Wehrmacht, double Stug G is probably going to be a pretty safe bet versus the Pershing. But you mean for the Americans, I mean, overall, again, still, they're not all too set in one way as they used to be, so that's pretty nice. You know, they're sort of shifting towards different things. Again, some are armor, some are airborne. Again, airborne even better now with the Thompsons basically being assault rifles on the paratroopers, which really makes them nasty, in particular if they use tactical assault. So, I mean, you know, there might be a further slight surge there to be expected in the near future. In terms of armor, it's largely, you know, Sherman EC8s, some Jacksons. The Scots rather dropped out there, so of course if you are playing the American, maybe surprise with the Scot for a bit of good effect. Upgrade-wise, again, it's all flamethrowers. I mean, some are beginning to use more BARs, more bazookas, but, you know, it's still going to be some, I think, some time before they really sort of catch on that, hey, that's actually pretty damn good. Moving on to the Soviets, it's very much sort of been the month of Führer syndrome there. It's very much been shock rifle. Some have gone for the doctrines, though. There have been sort of more research. Then basically people are going to use conscripts with submachine guns, so there's conscript doctrines, using a bit more of that. Armor-wise, it's very much tank-over-tank command last, you know, T-70, Section 6, again in particular, they're just going for the Führer syndrome move, get a single T-70, harass and bleed, and in some cases, that's all they need. I mean, some Soviet players actually make pretty good just rushing for it, and then just overwhelm the Wehrmacht player, which is prepared for it, and quickly pushing them back. So, I mean, that's also working out pretty well there for the Soviets. Some are going for Tier 4, but in most cases, it's more like they don't need it at the moment. And Wehrmacht players and Overcommand Command players in that sense need to sort of... I mean, in most cases, if they can just beat, you know, the Tier 3 rush, they'll generally be alright, because most players don't think that far ahead. But again, some more sort of, you know, well, Guards doctrines and the likes also being utilised. Guards been making a slight move back, though against shock troops very much it. But again, there's submachine guns. Again, it's very much shock rifle, and perhaps some doctrines that also give you access to KV-8, since, you know, that's also pretty damn good. I'm not probably to expect much different there from in the coming months, and again, in most cases, if you again, you know, rush for Tier 3 against the Soviets, you do pretty well, because again, most Soviet players are not going to be that fully prepared for it either. Panzer Grenadiers with the Wehrmacht, of course, rather decent counter at the moment as well. If the Oberkommand weißt, you know, Sturmpioneers, Obersoldaten or Fallschirmjäger, you know, just use your head. But I think that sort of rather covers the Allies at the moment. Again, they're all doing pretty well. I mean, some units could probably do some buffs there. The K1 could do with something. The KV8 could probably do with both of them. It could probably do with acquiring a building, but at the same time, maybe then make the K1 a bit cheaper and, give it a different veterancy ability, something that makes it a bit more, useful, gives it a bit more something, just up and stand up against the enemy with. Beyond that, not so much else really there to comment on. I think the Americans and the Brits are too early to say anything really there in terms of further changes and nerfs. I mean, there might be a case there for actually nerfing the EC8 because considering what you get for its price-wise, you actually get an awful lot, and that might require something being lost here or there, but go figure. As for the Wehrmacht, again, they're sort of the ones who generally tend to do the most alright in terms of strategy. Again, they're not sort of just hung up in one play. Though, I mean, again, we're sort of talking sort of larger movements. I mean, at the moment, Tier 3 sort of beginning to realise, again, popular with the Wehrmacht. They're realising, oh, hey, this is pretty good. They tend to just resort on Panzer 4. So if you can deal with the Panzer 4, get those counters, it'll do pretty alright in mines. Maybe an anti-tank gun, some armor of your own. Panzer 4 in that case will be pretty easily dealt with. Osttruppen has become really popular. I'm seeing a lot more Wehrmacht players using Osttruppen. Panzer grenadiers again are slowly again getting more and more usage, which is great. They've been so underutilized for such a long time. It's great to see more players actually using strategies, tactics, and so on around them. So that's damn good. Half tax with flamethrower upgrades also there. Though it seems to have already peaked a bit, which is a bit unfortunate. Tier 4s also make a bit of a return there with Panthers, Panzerwerfer, Sturmpanzers, and I'm actually seeing a few players beginning to make Tier 3 rush again. They're skipping Tier 2 to go straight for Tier 3. That's actually something I really like and hope to see more of in the nearer future. Of course, we'll have to see how that actually ends up working out. But again, Wehrmacht player sort of again seems the more flexible one in terms of sort of the player base. So again, you'll always get the ones that are going for the cheap stuff, just playing mechanized assault and playing straight for Stoogie, Tigers and so on. I'm just never going for all that. But again, Wehrmacht players do seem a bit more, again, pushing for other bits and pieces. But again, expect Osttruppen if you do, one option is just, get some upgrades for a basic infantry, fight them that way. I mean, Osttruppen generally can do alright on their own versus 1v1 if they cover versus infantry, but if you upgrade the infantry, they'll be struggling a lot more. So, I mean, that's one counter there for the Osttruppen, just, outfight them qualitatively with your own troops. Which is, unless you're the Russians, you should easily do, but they were just getting some Brens or some BARs for the Russians. Strafniki, perhaps just rush some T-70J half-tracks, just begin bleeding them out that way is your option. So there's certainly some, again, signs that everything's changing, and again, overall Wehrmacht is probably the one you have to be a bit more wary of, because again, they can in theory pull off a lot of moves, but generally if you can sort of keep the Wehrmacht pinned in quickly, pressure them, you can sort of force certain responses, which should give you a bit more time to sort of, again, do what you want. But again, that's also why they go for Osttruppen, because that then allows the Wehrmacht to be aggressive early on, and that might allow them to be a bit more sort of able to choose where to fight and so on. So that's again a little detail there to keep in mind when fighting with them. And again, you sort of want to then push the Osttruppen hard, and you try to flank them constantly. Don't fight them head on in a shootout, because it's overall not cost effective for you. And when you are fighting Osttruppen, you want to do it as efficiently as possible. So that's a little detail there to keep in mind. Oberkommando West, always, the one faction is going to get so caught up in one thing. Currently, it's light infantry gun spam with a bit of this and that, but overall, they just keep spamming it with battle group headquarters. A few go for mechanized regiment, but overall, it's currently just spam with, some machine guns to hold up things. Kubelwagens, these actually seem to have dropped out alongside a lot of other units. Some Panzer IVs are seen songs like Panthers, but, it's mostly just like infantry gun spam at the moment. I mean, it's going to get nerfed, which is great, but, it's probably still going to be battle group headquarters, the Volksgunners and all that, because, it's what works. And again, I mean, they really just need to decide what they want to do with the Volksgunners, because it's a 5-man squad with a Panzerschreck, which is generally not a good idea. It's too durable when it comes to the fighting armor. They need to drop it or put the Panzerschreck on something else, or simply create an independent tank team, a tank hunter team, something instead of that. Or they, need to make Volksgunners more expensive, perhaps, change them up a bit, make them like, more expensive Osttruppen, I suppose, require cover, but also out of cover they're going to be easy targets, for example. I mean, there are some options, but the Relic needs to decide what they want to do with the Oberkommando West, and their bullet doctrine, which, by the way, they're also getting at the end of the month, is just not quite near as impressive as the US one as well, so that's a bit unfortunate. Mechanized Regiment also needs something there to be looked at, perhaps some experiences, particularly with the Kubelwagen, it takes ages to get anywhere. Flak half-track takes ages to get anywhere with the veterans, and again, when they're so expensive, you really shouldn't have to deal with that as well. So I think there are some changes there again that are still needed with the Oberkommando West, and I still prefer full overhaul, but if that's not happening, look into the veterans and again do something with the force units. I mean, make them more expensive. Say 270 manpower, and make them sort of so they bleed more, because the upper command vets are going to have a lot of manpower, and then give them some ability so they push a bit harder that way. Beyond that, there's not really so much else. I mean, some all use Robosoldaten. Special operations that really hasn't seen a surge though, despite having infrared Sturmgewehr packages. Bit unfortunate, it's largely been fortification or Luftwaffe at the moment. Some go scavenge. Red Wings goes for elite armor, and that's about it really. So I think that rather sort of covers it here, sort of in terms of the state of the balance. Allies are sort of leading ahead, and some of them are focused about much more on one strategy, others not so much. So I think, yeah, again, that rather covers it. Hopefully this has been informative, hopefully this has been helpful for you, hopefully this is going to give you a better grasp on the state of the balance and what to do, what not to do. Again, it's always the idea so people can sort of think ahead, prepare, and again, hopefully, counter the opponent's moves. Of course, you generally sort of know what your opponent's more likely to do, you can prepare for it, you can strike ahead, and then you can sort of catch him with his pants down and beat him up. But again, when it comes to the Persian, again, you will see them, push hard for armor before him, because if he goes for your syndrome, you can then punish him forward, and if you go Wehrmacht, double Stukes the bet. So thank you all for joining in. Again, hopefully this has been helpful, educational, and hopefully you will do better in the future. So thank you all for joining in, and hope to see you all another time. Bye.